This video will be for the gathers sample. So for this sample, you will need two pieces. We've got this basic rectangle that's for the gathers and the pleats that we'll do next. And then you've got this long rectangle that is also for the gathers. So this one you had to paste together. So make sure that you matched up that circle at the center and pasted that together. Okay, and then when you cut these out, this top one, you can cut out the three top edges with your pinking shears. And then the bottom edge that's going to get stitched to the other side needs to be cut with your straight shears. And then for this one, it's the opposite. Top edge, where the seam allowance is straight. Bottom three sides are pinking shears. Okay, so let's go ahead and go start getting this stitched together. Okay, before I get started, I am going to do a basting stitch on this longer rectangle. So we need to bring our stitch length up to a 4.0, and then we'll be ready to start stitching. And I've got my standard foot on with my medium or lightweight needle for the cotton. Okay, once we've got that done, we are ready to start doing a basting stitch, and we're gonna do 2 to 3 rows of basting. So 2 is the absolute minimum, but 3 is recommended. So I'm going to put this under here. Our seam allowance when we attach it to our other rectangle will be 1/2 inch. So I'm going to do a stitching line on the 1/2 inch and then just to the left and to the right of it as well. So I'm gonna start at 3/8 of an inch. Right there. Make sure you have some tails at the back before you get started. You will need to pull on those later when we're gathering our sample. So I've got my stitch length up to a 4. I'm at 3/8 inch on my stitch width, my seam allowance width. And then I'm just going to do a basting stitch all the way down this piece, and I'm on that straight edge that we cut. And then when I get to the end, I'm going to lift up my needle and leave some tails at the end as well. So no back stitch for this one on either side. Grab my scissors real quick. Here we go. Okay, and then I'm going to go to the 1/2 inch and do another basting stitch there. So again, leave tails at the beginning and end. Lift up your needle, pull it out so you have some tails. And now one last time, again, starting with those tails. And I'm going to do this at the 5/8 inch. Now we're ready to head to our ironing board. We're going to gather this up and pin it to our other piece. Okay, so here I've got my 2 pieces that are ready to get ready to get pinned together. But first we have to scrunch this one up and gather it to fit this length. So on one side, I'm going to have top and bottom tails. So this, you can just pick a side. It'll be the same on either side. So pick one side. And then you should have a tail that's sitting on the top of your fabric here, and then one that's sitting towards the back of your fabric. So I'm going to grab the top for all 3 of these rows of stitching. Okay, so I got all 3 tops in my left hand, and then these 3 bottoms I'm going to leave hanging there. So all 3 of those tops I'm going to pull on. Pinch the fabric between your forefinger and your thumb right here. So it's just a light pinch. I'm not really firmly pinching it, But what I'm going to do is start dragging it as I hold on to these tails. So I'm pushing it and dragging it down those stitch line. So just keep holding on to the tail and keep scrunching this up. Okay, and then once you get to the length of the other sample, so I've still got a little bit further to pull. So just keep pushing this back. If you get stuck, you can kind of shift down the end of your line. Pull a little bit more. Okay, once you're to that same length as your top rectangle, now you need to spread these gathers out evenly among your rectangle. So I'm going to start scooting them all the way down to the end of the piece. And I'm just spreading them out with my fingers, scooting them left and right so that I've got an even amount of fullness. So you can see there's kind of a naked spot here. So I want to put more gathers down there. If I've got a lot bunched up in one area and less in the other, I want to spread that out. So I'm trying to make an even fullness throughout the entire sample. Okay, and then just double check that you're still the same length. As you adjust, sometimes that length can change. Okay, and then once you've got that done and you've got it the same length as the top rectangle, I'm gonna lay these right sides together and pin them together. So matching up that straight edge on both rectangles. I like to pin at either end first so that I know I'm staying that same length as my other rectangle. And then you can go and match up that raw edge with the raw edge of your flat rectangle. So if this was on a garment, I would most likely be matching up, let's say, a gathered skirt to the bodice of my dress. So this would be my skirt portion, the flat portion would be my bodice, and I'd be matching these up to stitch them together. So once you've pinned, you can use your fingers a little bit more to spread those out, and again, double check that your fullness is evenly spread before we stitch. Okay, now we're ready to go stitch these together. Okay, before I stitch these together, I need to take my stitch length back down to a 2.5 to get started. Okay, now I'm going to stitch these together at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So line that raw edge up with the 1/2 inch marking on your machine. And then you're going to stitch right over those gathers. So keep your raw edges even over here on the right hand side. Back stitch at the beginning and end. And then we're going to stitch right over those gathers so that we're permanently setting them into the fabric. Okay, and then back stitch to finish. Okay, now we're ready to go press this and finish it up. Okay, before we're able to press, we need to take out all of these basting stitches that we put in the beginning. So one at a time, you can pull on them. They should be looser, so they should be a little bit easier to pull out than a standard stitch. They may break. You can see some of mine are breaking as I go. That's okay. Pull out as much as you can by hand, and then whatever is still in there afterwards, you'll need to get out with your seam ripper. So I'm just pulling on one at a time. That one doesn't want to pull. Okay. Trim your tails. And make sure again that all your basting is out. So I've still got a little bit here that I can see. I would need to finish pulling that out before I turn in my sample. Okay, and then the next thing that we're going to do is press the seam allowances. So on this one, both of our seam allowances are gonna stay pointing towards the top of our sample. So that's towards this flat rectangle. And then all we're going to do is pull this on the front so that we get a really nice flat seam. I'm trying to orient myself, here we go. Okay, so pull on it so you get a nice flat seam, and then you don't want to press all of your gathers down because you want to keep that fullness. So I'm just pressing right along the seam line, but you want this to still be nice and flat right at that seam line. There we go. So keep all the fullness here, but press your actual seam flat. And then on the back, you can see both of those seam allowances are pressed up towards the top of the sample. Okay, and that is your gathering sample.